It was 2014. I sat in the media center of a local middle school among square pod tables in a low-ceiling, low-lit room as I listened to our new superintendent's update. He reviewed the academic proficiencies of different student subgroups. White students were at 75% proficient. Hispanic students were at 52%, and Black students were at 41% proficient. English language learners and those on free and reduced lunch were even worse. These uneven margins of achievement are not new. They have persisted for decades. I looked at the bars on the graph standing so starkly and deeply uneven. The bars seem to contain our community's understanding of these students' deep potential. They lock them in, stiff and immovable against the bright screen. I remember being so angry in that room. The message was clear: brown and Black students do not achieve, and the information was laid out and passed by without much thought or question from the crowd, as if it all just made sense. But it didn't to me. You see, I had been working in a Title I school for a few years at this point. Title I, meaning the vast majority of students that I worked with, qualified for free and reduced lunch. Most of my students were Black and brown, and they dealt with all the ills of poverty, along with what we threw at them during the school day. And the challenges my students faced were shocking, unnerving, and heartbreakingly impossible to solve. But I also found in my classroom that my students had deep potential. They had it in them to be the first generation college students, the trailblazers, the first to own homes, the first to start companies. They had it in them to take on the odyssey to drive their families forward out of poverty. They deeply wanted success. But so often they just wouldn't launch after high school. They didn't know what they had to offer in the competitive application process to college and career programs. And unfortunately, their parents were often too busy and stressed to notice or help. Try doing your homework with the lights off, or when you're hungry, or when your parents are gone for days at a time working 3 jobs, and we'll begin to have an understanding of what's truly driving the achievement gap. My students wanted to believe that the system worked. They wanted to believe that meritocracy was at play, but that's often not what they witnessed in their homes and communities. And because of that, they didn't go after opportunities that felt outside of their box. I want to believe in the American dream. I want to believe that any student can make it, no matter their obstacles, that the amount of opportunities our nation affords amount to greater than the challenges students in high-need communities face. I want to believe. But after working in one of these communities, I walked away full of doubt. I've looked directly into the eyes of students who don't make it, those who could have and should have. And while it's sad to watch a student shy away from the path that they're truly capable of, it is even more sad. No, it is demoralizing to consider how millions who don't have the right resources to do so affects our country as a whole. What became clear to me is that we don't measure high achievement well in schools. It doesn't always show up on the academic transcript. Sometimes high achievement is happening even when a student is struggling at school. My students were income contributors. They were caregivers. They were legal and medical document translators. They were taking advanced coursework outside of school because their schools didn't offer that advanced coursework, or they didn't have teachers qualified to teach it. The ins and outs driving the achievement gap, these economic and systemic forces, hold these circumstances hidden behind those stubborn metrics. This is what we didn't see in that media center. We take it as a fact and therefore unacceptable because it's unchangeable. But there's often more to the story. I want to tell you about a student that I worked with. Her name was Stacy. Stacy was interning at my organization, and her supervising professors were disappointed in her work. Stacy was often late. Her work was often late, and there were too many excuses following her into the classroom. But here's the thing. Stacy was working overnights, clocking 40 hours a week. At 19, she was managing the legal process to sponsor her family in Haiti to come to the United States. She barely slept. She had come here at 16 to live with an aunt, and when her aunt suddenly passed away, Stacy tried to hide her homelessness so that she wouldn't be moved out of her high school so close to graduation. She lived in her car. And it wasn't until a community organization provided Stacy a stable home that she then had the stable foundation to go on to college. And she was doing so much more than her academic requirements. Considering her obstacles, she was excelling. She had the right combination of grit, determination, and optimism that any company would want to hire for. But she was overlooked in the academic setting. She was not a standout student. She was a standout human being. And there are millions like her, millions who struggle to make it to and through college, and the potential for their future earnings go unrealized. In fact, a report by the McKinsey Institute found that had our achievement gap been bridged by 1998, a decade later, our US GDP would have been as much as $670 billion more. They found that the effect of the achievement gap is significant, comparable to the effect of all recessions we have faced since the 1970s. The fact remains, higher education is linked with future earning potential. And so higher education in low-income communities is vital. But we are not moving the needle. In fact, low-income student enrollment in college has dropped 10% in the last 10 years. So how do we cross this chasm? First, we need to agree on a few things, what we are not going to do. The first thing that we are not going to do, we are not going to blame parents. In his book, Achieving Equity in Schools, Glenn E. Singleton found that families from low-income backgrounds start out with these same academic aspirations as those from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. It is only when faced with barrier after barrier, each preventing access to opportunity, that these families ultimately lower their academic ambitions. You see, struggling financially, it does something to the culture of a home. It's like living in a pressure cooker. People are stressed, depressed, and withdrawn, and while bills stack, optimism sinks. And there is nothing more hopeful and optimistic than deciding to invest in a college education. But this is not an environment ripe with hope. The second thing that we need to agree on is that we are not going to pretend that we can fix our struggling education system. I know you don't like hearing that. It sounds pessimistic. But I have seen this system up close. I understand the levers making decisions and the behemoth amount of policy change that it would take to change our struggling system. And in the last 30 years, we have seen curriculum standards change multiple times. And unfortunately, there is little to no conclusive evidence that any of these approaches have worked. The achievement gap has never once budged significantly. The system runs, but it's broken with a complexity wide and deep, and it's missing the most valuable change needed, the one that is impossible to strategize, quantify, and track, and that is the connection a student feels within a culture of striving and success. So let's be realistic and talk about how we can truly move the needle and truly change those stubborn numbers. And what I want us all to realize is that to do that effectively, we have to look for an answer outside of the classroom. Do you remember the moment, the project, the classroom where you first felt self-satisfied, where you first realized, I am smart? Somebody else thinks that I am smart. More importantly, somebody believes in me. Forming an identity rooted in the understanding that I am a learner, I can learn, I can succeed, is foundational to academic achievement. The moment that each of you all realized that you had the capacity to learn, likely told to you by a trusted adult, That was the moment that put you on the trajectory that wound you up here today in the great halls of the University of Florida. As students strive to do more than what they may think they are capable of, the power of a village of support or just one caring, consistent adult saying, "Great job. You did well even though you didn't get the outcome you wanted. I'm proud of you. I believe in you," can make all the difference. Long-term, pro-social relationships founded in care, that is the linchpin that will close the achievement gap. And it all starts with what happens outside of school. But in communities of extraordinary challenges, toxic stress, and trauma, finding these connective and restorative relationships are hard to come by. People are overwhelmed, overburdened, and in survival mode, and the kids suffer for it. Psychologists and social scientists have found that when you are in the environment of connection, you actually achieve higher levels of cognition and make connections between materials more easily. They found that your prefrontal cortex lights up more easily when you are being influenced by someone who you respect, someone whose values and beliefs you find align with your own. And this is where I feel schools are completely tapped out, with a student-to-guidance counselor ratio of 500 to 1, overcrowded schools, and teachers focused on student assessments rather than student self-actualization. And finding those cultures of warmth and determination and activities that light up your brain are hard to come by in low-income communities, activities that require a parent driver, a registration fee, materials, and time to practice. So often we think it's just about the money, and it is, but it's also about having that positive environment to experiment in, the type of environment that helps you show up with the confidence you need to achieve in schools. We see it all the time at Path to College, the nonprofit I founded in South Florida, where we help overlooked and underestimated students become standout applicants to top-tier schools. We provide a project-based environment that provides a low-stakes, highly competitive curriculum that challenges students to be their best selves, that allows them to experiment and even fail without punishment or consequence. And we have found mentoring to be the most vital aspect of our work. Every student gets a one-on-one mentor, one caring, consistent adult that follows them through the course of the program. And we've seen incredible outcomes. Take Carlos. When Carlos started in our program, he had a 2.4 GPA and a mother who battled drug addiction. Carlos came to our meetings, he did the tutoring, but sometimes we wouldn't hear from him. Sometimes he would be staying at his sister's house, but there his uncle was staying, and he had mental illness and violent tendencies. Other times, he'd be living with his grandmother, but there he had to share a bed with her and a cousin, and there wasn't always enough food. And it was Carlos's mentor, Bill, who showed up for him consistently, who reminded him of his abilities, his potential, his capacity to outgrow his circumstances. And Carlos kept coming, but his life did not get easier. He had to work multiple jobs to make it through. But he kept coming. He did the financial literacy day. He did the public speaking project. He came to our college prep sessions. He even got an internship. At the end of our program, Carlos got into FSU, a top-tier university. He got a scholarship, and he's now studying aerospace engineering. That is the power of mentoring. And these powerful mentoring relationships are at the heart of what we do. We've seen students escape political persecution in their home countries, come through our program, and make it to Harvard on a full-ride scholarship. Students who faced multiple relentless evictions, a lack of electricity, showers by the hose instead of the faucet, go on to join you on a full ride at UF. Students whose parents had severe mental illness are at Cornell. Those who lost parents are at Emory, and those who simply lacked resources are at Georgetown, Northwestern, Stanford, Duke, and more. And they belong there. We've seen students go on to do more than what others may have thought they were capable of. Closing the achievement gap is possible, but it starts in the hearts and minds of caring community members. So what can we do better? Individuals like you can help. You can show up for that kid, the one who seems a little lost, who maybe isn't impressive yet. You can show up with nothing but encouragement consistently. You can learn their stories. Parents, you can have that kid over for dinner. You can share rides and tutoring opportunities. Businesses need to offer apprentice and internship programs to students in low-income communities with an understanding that it might be difficult for them to find the right clothing and transportation to make it work. But there is a return on this investment. Diversity drives performance. Cities need to fund after-school programs that allow students to develop long-term positive relationships in an atmosphere and do activities that helps light up their brains. These are the missing elements in low-income communities, elements so simple they're easy to overlook. Look left and look right, and think about who could have been here with you. Think about those who got knocked out of the path to college before they knew the game they were playing, all because of a lack of support. Any higher education community needs to think deeply about those afforded the ability to participate and how they got there. We need to question, what if our country were a true meritocracy? How would the halls of our classrooms look differently? What research initiatives and enterprises might shift? What perspectives and innovations might go out into the world if there were no longer an achievement gap? The potential to disrupt those unequal metrics is within our grasp, but we need to believe that education is the answer. We need to understand that education is more than just school, it is community. And we need to deeply grasp that education at its core is love, is connection, and is the affirmation of the deepest, most sacred parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that beg to be seen, to be valued, and to be believed in. We need to realize that in the land of opportunity, the most special and life-changing opportunities we can provide is our dedication and commitment to another human being's success, because we are the only ones who can change it. We are the ones we've been waiting for.